I would notice myself dragging through plans that looked good on paper, but did not actually fit the reality of my life. And instead of questioning the plan, I questioned myself. I told myself I lacked discipline. I told myself I was lazy. I told myself that everyone else must have access to some secret reserve of energy or clarity that I was missing. And every time I ended up further disconnected from myself than when I started. What I see now is that I was trying to perform transformation instead of live it. If you have ever looked around at your life and thought, this can't be it, you are in the right place. This is Flying Upstream, the podcast for people who refuse to live on autopilot. I'm your host, Kristin Medeiros. Each week, I sit down with people who questioned the rules, challenged the expectations, and chose a different path. Not because it was easy, but because it was honest. We talk about the moments that broke them open, the decisions that scared them, and the lives they built when they stopped doing what they were told and started listening to themselves. If you are done following the crowd and ready to trust your own way forward, stay with me. Let's fly upstream. Hey everyone, I'm Kristin, and today I want to talk about something that shows up every single January, whether we ask for it or not. The pressure to reinvent yourself, the pressure to start over, the pressure to look at your life and decide that the version of you who made it to December 31st is suddenly outdated, insufficient, or in need of fixing. I want to talk about why I think that pressure is a lie. And I want to talk about the quieter choice, the less visible one, the choice to move differently when everyone else is rushing to declare a fresh start. Because I don't hear enough people saying this out loud. And I know from the messages I get and the conversations I've had, a lot of you are feeling it, even if you can't quite put words to it yet. January is loud. It does not ease you in. It does not ask how you are actually doing. It arrives with a megaphone. Reset, optimized, get disciplined, fix your habits, fix your body, fix your work, fix your mindset. Become a better version of yourself immediately. And if you do not feel that surge of motivation, if you wake up still tired, still unsure, still carrying things from last year, it can feel like you already failed, like you missed the starting line before you even knew the race had begun. I want to slow this down for a moment because I genuinely believe January has become one of the most emotionally manipulative months of the year. It sells the idea that you should be able to wipe the slate clean just because the calendar flipped, as if the experiences you lived through last year politely packed up and left at midnight, as if your nervous system, your grief, your exhaustion, your growth, your questions all operate on a 12-month schedule. This is the lie underneath all of it. The lie is that January is a clean slate. The lie is that growth has a start date. The lie is that exhaustion means you did something wrong. The lie is that if you do not reinvent yourself right now, you missed your chance. The lie is that there is something fundamentally wrong with the version of you who survived last year. None of that is true. I want to say that again because some of you need to hear it slowly. There is nothing wrong with the version of you who made it through last year. Even if last year was messy, even if you did not accomplish what you thought you would, even if you are carrying regret or disappointment or grief or confusion, survival is not a failure. Continuation is not a lack of ambition. Sometimes staying is the bravest thing you can do. For a long time, I bought into the January story completely. I treated it like a test I had to pass. Every year, I made lists, goals, intentions, a word for the year that sounded aspirational and responsible. And for a few days or maybe a couple of weeks, I would ride that initial wave of motivation. I would tell myself that this time it would stick because I wanted it badly enough. And then something would happen. I would start to feel heavy, resistant, behind. I would notice myself dragging through plans that looked good on paper, but did not actually fit the reality of my life. And instead of questioning the plan, I questioned myself. I told myself I lacked discipline. I told myself I was lazy. I told myself that everyone else must have access to some secret reserve of energy or clarity that I was missing. So I would push harder. I would double down. I would try to force momentum that was not there. I would try to outwork the discomfort instead of listening to it. And every time I ended up further disconnected from myself than when I started. What I see now is that I was trying to perform transformation instead of live it. January has turned into a performance, a public display of ambition and self improvement. People announce new routines, new identities, new rules for themselves. And again, there is nothing wrong with wanting change. There's nothing wrong with growth. But when growth becomes something you feel you have to prove, it stops being personal. It stops being honest. It becomes something you do for approval instead of alignment. If you are quietly tired in January, if you are still processing grief or burnout or confusion from the year before, it can feel like you're doing January wrong. Like everyone else got the memo and you did not. Like you should be further along emotionally than you are. Like you should be more grateful, more excited, more motivated than you actually feel. But when I look back at the most meaningful changes in my life, very few of them came from dramatic restarts. They did not come from January declarations or perfectly planned resolutions. They came from quiet decisions I made over time. Decisions to stop forcing myself into timelines that were not mine. Decisions to stop explaining myself to people who were never going to understand anyway. Decisions to stop trying to prove that I was doing life correctly. Choosing differently does not always look bold. Sometimes it looks almost invisible. It looks like opting out of the noise. It looks like not posting your goals, not announcing a big shift, not rushing to label what comes next. It looks like sitting with uncertainty longer than feels comfortable. It looks like letting something unfold instead of trying to control it. And that kind of choice takes courage because our culture rewards speed. It rewards certainty and visibility and progress. It rewards people who can say exactly what they're doing and where they're going. It does not reward patience. It does not reward discernment. It does not reward quiet alignment. If you cannot explain what you are doing in a neat sentence, people get uncomfortable. Sometimes they project that discomfort onto you. They ask questions, they offer advice you did not ask for. They suggest that you should be doing more. Flying upstream lives right here, not in being contrary for the sake of it, but in noticing when everyone is being pulled in the same direction and asking yourself whether that direction actually feels right. January pulls hard. Fix this, do more, become someone new. And choosing to pause instead is not laziness. It is awareness. It is saying that your inner life matters more than external momentum. Real growth is rarely loud. It often starts as discomfort, a subtle sense that something no longer fits the way it used to, a knowing that you cannot go back to who you were, but you are not ready to declare who you are becoming. That in between space is deeply uncomfortable. It is uncertain. It is unpolished and it does not photograph well. So we try to escape it. We distract ourselves with goals. We pressure ourselves into action. We rush clarity. We tell ourselves that if we could just decide something, commit to something, do something, the discomfort would go away. But clarity doesn't respond well to force. It shows up when you create enough space to tell yourself the truth. And the truth is not always neat. Sometimes the truth is that you are tired in a way sleep will not fix. Sometimes the truth is that something you worked hard for no longer fits the life you want. And sometimes the truth is that you do not actually want what you thought you wanted. And admitting that feels terrifying because it means letting go of an identity you built your life around. There's a lot of unspoken grief in January. Grief for the year that did not turn out the way you hoped. Grief for a version of yourself you thought you would be by now. Grief for the energy you used to have. Grief for the certainty you used to feel. And instead of making space for that grief, January tells you to cover it up with productivity. If you are listening to this and feeling behind, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not late. You are not broken. You are not failing January. You might simply be in a season where listening matters more than doing, where integration matters more than acceleration, where honoring what your body and mind are telling you is more important than keeping up appearances. For me, this year is not about becoming something new. It's about becoming more honest, honest about what drains me, honest about what energizes me, honest about the expectations I have been carrying that were never mine to begin with, honest about the ways I have been performing instead of living. That kind of honesty does not come from a resolution list. It comes from slowing down enough to notice your own patterns. It comes from asking yourself hard questions and not rushing to fix the answers. It comes from allowing yourself to grieve the versions of life you thought you would have, even if those versions looked good from the outside. When reinvention comes from pressure, it disconnects us from ourselves. We start chasing ideals instead of alignment. We start fixing things that are not broken. We start confusing exhaustion with failure. And we start thinking that rest is something we have to earn. Eventually, we burn out, not because we lacked discipline, but because we ignored our own signals for too long. A fresh start does not have to mean wiping everything clean. Sometimes it means staying with what works, staying with what feels grounded, staying with yourself when it would be easier to escape into busyness or distraction. Staying does not mean settling. It does not mean integrating what you have already learned instead of discarding it in favor of something shinier. There is a version of growth that looks like adding more habits, more routines, more goals, more effort, more structure. And sometimes that is helpful. But there is also a version of growth that looks like subtraction, letting go of what no longer serves you, letting go of the need to explain yourself, letting go of the belief that you have to earn rest or justify your pace or constantly prove that you are doing enough. Instead of goals, I am holding questions this year. Questions that do not demand immediate answers. Questions that are meant to be lived with, not solved. What am I ready to stop proving? What do I want to protect more fiercely? Where am I forcing clarity instead of allowing it? These questions do not need to be rushed. They will reveal themselves slowly if you give them space. I think one of the hardest things about January is the assumption that you should feel hopeful and energized just because it is a new year. And if you do not, you assume something is wrong with you. But hope does not always feel loud. Sometimes hope looks like rest. Sometimes hope looks like refusing to make promises you can't keep. Sometimes hope looks like trusting that you don't need to see the whole path to take the next honest step. If no one has given you permission yet, let me do that right now. You are allowed to move slowly this year. You are allowed to change quietly. You are allowed to choose depth over display. You are allowed to not know what comes next. You are allowed to be unfinished. You are allowed to take your time. You do not owe anyone a transformation story. Flying upstream is often invisible at first. It is an internal decision long before it becomes an external shift. It is choosing honesty over optics, alignment over approval, depth over speed. And those are the changes that last because they're rooted in truth, not pressure. January doesn't get to define you. This year does not need a more optimized version of you. It needs a more aligned one. And alignment rarely comes from force. It comes from listening, from paying attention to what feels heavy and what feels light, from noticing where you are pushing yourself out of fear instead of moving from desire. If you take nothing else from this, take this. You do not need to reinvent yourself to be worthy of this year. You are allowed to arrive exactly as you are, with your questions, with your fatigue, with your quiet hopes, and you can let the rest unfold in its own time. Thank you for spending this time with me, truly. I know your attention is valuable. Share this with someone who feels the weight of January a little heavier than expected. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. If today's conversation sparked something in you, take a moment to sit with it. You can find more episodes and resources at flyingupstreampodcast.com. And if this show speaks to you, the best way to support it is to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who is ready to question the path they are on. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and always keep flying upstream.